Okay, in this video we're going to go through how to set up a new user in QuickBooks Enterprise. QuickBooks Enterprise user settings are much more elaborate, I guess, than QuickBooks Pro Premier or QuickBooks Online. It has a very high level of security compared to the other products. So in a Pro Premier, as an example, right, you have access to accounts payable, which kind of gives you access to everything in the accounts payable area. And when you're dealing with enterprise, it's at the transaction level. So we'll look at that in just a second here. So first of all, we want to go up to company and then down to users and set up users and roles. And of course, you have to be logged in as admin anytime you're dealing with any kind of users and roles, right? So let me put in my admin password. Now you have to have a strong admin password in QuickBooks, right? And here's my user list. Okay, so I have anybody who's on my user list already. I can click on the different people and see what roles are assigned to the users. You can have multiple roles assigned to one user, right? So if I edit test as an example, I can assign accounts payable role and accounts receivable role. Okay, so now it has multiple roles there. You can also assign multiple roles to one user. So if I had any additional users in here, I can assign accounts payable to them as well. So let's go ahead and set up a new user. Okay, so we put in a username. So I'm going to put in here Rob. The username that you put in here is what they will type in every time that they log into QuickBooks, right? Especially when you're in the server environment, like a hosted environment, this name is really important. You don't want it to be too long because in the server environment, you are all kind of logging into the same server, right? Same environment. So if Joey logs in, and then Rob goes to log in, it's going to pull up automatically Joey's username. So you want to make sure that those aren't too long. I've had customers who go in and say, Rob _Adams at Fourlane.com. As an example, that's too long. You want to make it pretty short. Okay. Now the password you can make more elaborate, of course. So again, you want to put in a username. That's going to be it's not case sensitive, so you can do uppercase or lowercase. Put in their name here. Give them a temporary password, okay, so that they have a password set up in the beginning. But then, of course, we also want to train users on how to change their password so it's their own. The admin can always go in and reset people's passwords. All right, so put in a password here. I'm just going to put it in one letter. And then down here you choose which roles, and we'll talk about roles here in a second, which roles are assigned to this particular user. Okay, so if they have the AR role, right, we noticed test and Rob now have the AR role, maybe inventory or something. Okay, so that's setting up a user. Then when we have the role list, the second tab here. So QuickBooks Enterprise is going to come with some preset roles. Okay, most of these roles you can edit. There are a few you cannot edit. So you can't edit external accountant. You can't edit admin, right? Because those are pretty standard. And external accountant, just as a side, is a really important role because if you assign external accountant to a user, they have access to QuickBooks as if they are a pro advisor or an accountant, right? So they get this accountant drop down, which has a whole bunch of functionality in there for them to, mass reclassify transactions, mass delete transactions. So be careful who you assign that role to. Okay. So again, I can come in here, take one of the existing roles, and I can edit it and go through and modify it to be what we want it to be. Or I can go through and create one from scratch, which we're going to do in a second. And then also, if we start creating roles from scratch or taking these, we can duplicate a role. So you don't have to start from scratch. It kind of gives you a good base. And then, of course, we can delete roles. So I'm going to go ahead and start this one from scratch. And we're going to pretend like this is a new AP clerk that we hired. Now you can put a description in here for what they do, enter bills, Maybe that's it. I don't know. Enter bills, maybe bill credits or vendor credits. Okay, so I'm going to go through this in full right now, so it's going to be long, but I really suggest sitting through and listening in full all of the different options that you have at least one time, because it can get quite confusing. Okay, so under the accounting rule here, so first of all, notice there's headers and subcategories when it comes to the roles area. And if I wanted them to have full access to accounting, I can highlight the top role here, right, and say full, and it fills in all for me. So if I know that the majority of these things are going to have, and maybe I'm going to go into a couple and take away a little bit of access, that's a quick way to fill it in. All right, or if I know it's going to be none, that's a quick way to get rid of any kind of responsibilities in that area. So the accounting tools area, right? So that's again this accountant toolbox up here. So do they have access to accounting tools? Notice it's full or none. You can't say they can mass reclassify, but they can't mass delete. So again, you want to be really aware of that. Asset registers. So can they open up if you go into list and chart of accounts and you see all of your assets, right? AR, current assets, long-term assets, bank accounts. Do they have access to see those registers? Maybe they can view the registers, but they can't print them. Okay. Now again, this isn't at the transaction level yet, right? This is at a higher level. Can they edit closed transactions, right? So anything that we have closed the time period, close the books, can they edit transactions in a closed time period? Yes or no? Equity registers, similar to asset registers, do they have access? Journal entries. So this is a transaction now, so you see there's a little bit more access level. So you can say full access, partial. They can view journal entries, but they can't create, modify, delete, print them. Maybe they can view and print them. Maybe they can create them, but they can't modify, delete, print them. Right? So you can choose what access level they have there. Liability registers, similar to assets and equity, right? So this is the accounts payable, credit cards, other current liabilities, etc. Can they manage fixed assets? So this is something that's an enterprise under company. Enterprise does have a fixed asset manager inside of the company file. So do they have access to that fixed asset manager? You do have to be in single user mode to access it. So it's all or none. Okay. And a note there too, the fixed asset manager, when you work in it, it stores your fixed asset data locally, naturally, right? So you need to make sure to be aware of that as well. Can they act in the working trial balance? So up under the accountant tools again there, do they have access to the working trial balance? Okay, banking, do they have access to bank feeds? So online banking, it's all or nothing, right? So it's not limited on the bank accounts that they have access to. They have access to all or nothing. Bank registers, so this is where you can decide, maybe they don't have access to bank feeds, but they do have access to view the company checking account as an example. Maybe they don't have access to the company payroll account. Okay, so these are my specific cash accounts that they have access to. Okay. Now again, you have to be aware, right? Because if you say they don't have access to any asset registers, but then they do have access to the company checking account, it's kind of going against each other there. So you want to make sure that you have the appropriate roles. The best way is to go in and test it. Okay. QuickBooks will warn you if you need to grant them access. So if they try and go into an area that they don't have access to, QuickBooks will pop up a box that says you do not have access to this area. Talk to your administrator if you feel this is incorrect. And it usually gives some kind of hint in there. You know, you need access to asset registers as an example in order to view this area. Okay. Going down, checks again. These are transactions, view, create, modify, delete. Credit card charges, same thing. Credit card registers, okay, again, so can they access the credit card registers, which again would fit into the liability registers area. Deposits, these are transactions. Do they have access to the loan manager? So QuickBooks does also have a loan manager, which allows you to set up on the payable side, right? So if you have an equipment loan or anything like that that you need to amortize, It's frequently used with my customers for vehicle loans. We need to amortize the payments automatically, right? So it breaks out the principal versus the interest for us based on, and it sets up an amortization schedule for us. Okay, so do they have access to that? Can they reconcile bank accounts, credit card accounts, whatever? Reconcile, yes or no? Can they transfer funds? Again, this is a transaction, so view, create, modify, delete. Okay. In the centers area, so do they have access to the centers? Now, this isn't a transaction, but this is a list entry, right? So again, can they create customers? Can they modify customers? Can they delete customers, right? Can they view balances of customers? All right. So it's a little bit different than when we're looking at the transaction level because we have this view balance part. Employees, view, right? Create, modify, delete, view payroll information. Vendors, similar to customers. Okay, so again, this is where we go customers, up into customers, and then open up the customer center. It gives us our customer list, our vendor list, our employees list, etc. All right, moving along into the company area. So do they have access to the bill tracker? Again, under vendors, open up bill tracker. It's a new feature. Let's say 16.0, I think it came out. So bill tracker came out in 16.0. Do they have access to see the bill tracker? So it's a yes or no. Billing solutions sign up. I don't even think that this is used anymore, but it's a yes or no. Calendar, do they have access to the calendar? Calendar was a nice feature that was added a couple years ago, but I don't have very many customers who use it. I just prefer to leave it as no. It's just confusing. Company information, so can they edit the company's information, meaning, you know, the legal address, the company name, etc. Yes, no. Company preferences, that's a big one. So can they go into edit preferences and then open up the company preferences side and make changes? Obviously, for the majority of company preferences, they have to be in single user mode. So you want to be aware of that. Can they enter vehicle mileage? Can they find all transactions? So this one's a kind of a difficult one as well, because, and notice it gives you a pop-up, right? Giving access to this will allow users to find transaction types, including payroll, that they are not authorized to view. So if you want them to be able to find anything, use this find here, right? They also have the search feature, of course, which you can use up top. The income tracker, similar to the bill tracker. So again, all or none access. Insights on the home page. Do you want them to have that Insights tab right here so they can see some of the company, you know, kind of dashboard-ish stuff. Planning and budgeting. So can they set up business planning and analysis using the business planning and analysis tools? Can they set up budgets and forecasting? Yes or no? Notice it's not view, create, modify, edit on that one. It's all or nothing. Can they print labels? Do they have remote access? QuickBooks Enterprise does have a remote access tool built into it, which was very cool before we had so many hosting options and log me in and everything like that. So again, I don't know very many people who use this. If you do use it, it's time to look at something else because, you know, for $2 a month or whatever Log Me and Rescue tends to be, it's definitely worth it for the speed to not use the one that's built into Enterprise. Set closing date password. So can they close the books? Can they change that password? Can they set up bank feeds? Not only do they have access, but can they also set them up? And then synchronize contacts. I always make sure that this one's off also. So this is something about synchronizing your Outlook contacts to QuickBooks, and that can be kind of messy. So, all right. Customers and receivables. So do they have access to accounts receivable accounts? Do they have access to assess finance charges, billable time and costs? So can they check mark that little billable box? And then when they create an invoice, can they add billable time and costs to invoices? Can they change item prices? Full, none. Can they do credit card refunds, right? So this is a transaction. Can they create credit memos? Again, transaction, estimates, invoices, these are all transaction level. Can they override a credit limit? Yes or no? So there's not a feature in there that says, pop up a box and allow a manager to put in a code and it overrides, right? Like a POS system would do. But these people have the ability to override the credit limit. Of course, it'll give warnings and stuff like that. Can they receive payments? This is a transaction. Sales order, sales receipt, those are all transactions. Statement charges. Can they create statements to send out to customers? So all or nothing access. Undeposited funds accounts. Can they use credit card numbers? Right, none in full. And then can they view credit card numbers? So you can view credit card numbers. We can't export credit card numbers out of QuickBooks, but you can view them. Sometimes you do need access to more than just the last 4 digits. Okay, so employees and payroll. So if they don't have access to payroll or you're not running payroll in QuickBooks, just leave that as none. Can they view, create, modify paychecks, payroll adjustments, liabilities? Again, these are all right, transaction level transactions, and then payroll liabilities. Can we print? Can we e-pay? All right, payroll service activities. Do they have full access or no access to the payroll service, meaning our service with Intuit, right? Enhanced, assisted, full service payroll. And then payroll tax forms. Can they print or e-file payroll tax forms as well? Okay, going along. File. Can they create a backup? Yes or no? Can they clean up company data? No. Right. I don't want anybody to be able to clean up company data. That's doing a condense in here. Don't do it. If you need a condense, call us. Don't do the one inside of QuickBooks. Can they export data, right? Export to IF file, etc. Can they import data? Okay, there's some import. So this is under file, utilities, import, file, utilities, export. So that's what this is talking about here. Do they have access to QuickBooks Advanced Reporting? So this is also one, enterprise only. It's a really big deal. It's kind of like the find. If you have access to QuickBooks Advanced Reporting, you have access to everything in the company file. Payroll, it's not limited, right? So you can't come down here to reports and say they have access to customer and receivable reports, because if you give them advanced reporting, they have access to everything. All right. Do they have access to rebuild the company files? To the shipping area, so file, right, and then shipping, and then also to verify data. So very few people should have access to this file stuff, right? Not just general everyday day-to-day users. This would be administration users only. All right, moving on to our lists. So we have chart of accounts, and this is a list similar to our centers up top, right? So chart of accounts, can they create chart of accounts? Can they edit them, delete? Can they view the balance on the chart of accounts? Classes, currency. Okay, the customer and vendor profile list, so similar to when you go up to lists here and you go down to customer and vendor profile, you can expand this to see all of the different lists, right? So do you want them to be able to edit the customer message list, edit the sales rep list, print it, right? The fixed asset item list, again, this is different than the fixed asset manager that we talked about up top. This is a list on your list up top here, fixed asset item list. Inventory site list. Can they add new sites, new bins, right? If you need them to be able to add bins, they need access. The items list, the other names list. Try not to use that, so let's turn that one off. Payroll items list, probably not. Very many people need access to that. Price level, billing level list, okay? So price levels, if you're using those, or price rules, can they edit price rules? Sales tax codes, and then also templates. Do they have the ability to edit your templates? Okay. All right. So reports, accountant and taxes. So one of the things that's really important to note here, so this drop down here is similar to when you click on reports and you see the drop down of the generic high level report categories, right? And so that's what this is meant to do. So if you say they have access to banking reports, they're going to have access to all reports that fall under that banking category, right? So previous reconciliations, reconciliation discrepancy, check reports, etc. All of those reports they'll have access to. You can't limit it to the one report. It's at the higher level here. Then you see some of these that are you can expand. Okay, so what these are for a couple reports. You may allow them, so maybe in company financial, they can see the P&L and the balance sheet, right? Because that's what falls under company financial. They can see the standard summary, but they can't run the detail reports. Okay, so that's what those fall into. So each of these reports, it's really important to be aware of. Again, the find report, right? That's the same where you hit Control F. It pops up and says everything. You have access to everything in there, right? You search for $20. It's going to show up every $20 that's ever shown up in the system. And then can you create a report from that? That's what this is. One of the most important ones to note, though, is the memorized report list, right? So the memorized report list, again, under reports, it's up top, memorized report list. So it comes standard with a whole bunch of company and financial information, right? So before you give anybody access to the memorized report list, you need to go in and get rid of some of the standards that come in there, because again, it has a whole bunch of like P&L by class, things like that. Maybe some information that you don't want people to have access to. Now, the memorized reports list is helpful, right? If you need to share reports with multiple people at the company that you've built, okay? Those, again, if they have access to the memorized reports list, they have access to any report on that list. All right. What I do is I don't use the memorized reports list, right? Because a lot of people used to use this before we could save reports to our icon bar. So if it's someone who needs to run this report frequently, instead of saving it to the memorized reports list where anybody has access to edit it, rename it, save it, whatever, I build the report when I'm logged in as their user and I save it to their icon bar. So it's theirs. Okay? And there's other videos on that. Time tracking. So again, these are transactional, single time activity, weekly timesheet, and then can they do the timer import and export? Again, I don't even think that that's available anymore, so I don't know why that's there. Most people go through the web connector or straight through the SDK to get some time tracking data in. And then finally, we have vendors and payables. Do they have access to accounts payable accounts? Can they adjust the quantities? So this is a transaction, right? Inventory adjustment. Can they build assemblies, enter bills, item receipts, pay bills, pay sales tax, print 1099s, right? 1096, full or none. Purchase orders, sales tax adjustment, and then can they do transfer inventory? Okay. So for an AP clerk, let's go back to this. So for an AP clerk, they won't need access to the bank register most likely. They probably would need access to maybe modify vendors, right? So my vendor's name changed, my vendor's street address changed, or they have a new phone number or whatever it is. Probably they'd need access to view the balances for vendors. Okay, but maybe they don't create new vendors, right? They don't have the ability to accept people on our vendors list as a new vendor. They can't delete them. Printing vendors isn't that big of a deal. Maybe, preventing people from printing customers is a big deal, but not vendors so much. So then coming down here, maybe, skipping over some of these things, maybe they need access to the items list. Do they need to create new items? Probably not, right? Because the AP clerk is not going to be doing purchasing, so the purchase orders would already be in the system. Maybe they need to be able to modify items slightly, okay? So that would be something maybe to consider. But most of the time, they're going to be down here in the vendors area. So they need the ability to view, create, modify bills. They're not going to be doing the item receipts because the warehousing guys are going to be doing that, or gals, right? Maybe they can view bill payments so they can see, is this bill paid already or whatever it is, but they can't create, modify, delete them. And same with purchase orders. Maybe they can view purchase orders, but they can't create, modify, delete, or print them. Okay, so very low level of access. The one thing I tell people, because, of course, when you're talking about do you have access, do you not have access, sometimes that can be an uncomfortable conversation. So you want to make sure that when you're setting users up in here, right, the tighter the security, the better it is for the company, the better it is for them. Because if they don't have access to, reconcile bank accounts, they can't accidentally go in there and do something. It protects them just as much as it protects the company. And when somebody goes, well, who reconciled this account? This new AP clerk can say, not me. I don't even have access to that area of the program. Okay. All right. So that's how you set up new users in Enterprise.